Thank you very much for the invitation to come and talk about this very, very important issue. Before I go on to make my comments, I just want to explain very briefly what the South African National Commission for UNESCO is. So there's absolutely no understanding on whose behalf I'm talking. I'm not talking on behalf of UNESCO. All countries that belong to UNESCO have a UNESCO commission in their countries, and those commissions are independent of UNESCO. Their function essentially is to bring civil society organizations into understanding what's happening in UNESCO. So my comments, especially my rude comments about Trump, are not endorsed by UNESCO or anybody else. I've been asked to look at some of the outcomes and the implications about Trump's views on science. But I want to start with a very uncomfortable issue, and that's some of the implications of our own views on science, to remember, so that we can remember what happened in this country whilst we're looking at what's happening in the United States. And so I'm sure that you'll all agree that one of the biggest disasters in our country, because of our attitude towards science, has been the issue of AIDS and AIDS denialism in this country. Okay. Some of the estimates are that more than 300,000 people died of AIDS because we didn't give the drugs out in time, because our president, and we need to say this, had a view on AIDS that was not supported by the scientific community. We also have a whole lot of other issues that we need to think about. Now, I'm raising these issues because I think that when we talk about the implications of, Trump's views on science, we bring those lessons back to our own country, and so that we can actually learn about it and make sure that we don't make the same mistakes we've made in the past. In our country at this moment, and I'm going to come back to this later in my talk, we have the issue of nuclear energy and fracking. Okay. It's clear to me that people who are demanding nuclear energy in our country are people who will benefit financially from the nuclear energy. It's also clear to me that the people who are saying there's nothing wrong with fracking are the people who are going to benefit financially in South Africa about fracking. And they're saying the same things in the United States right now. But when we look at these implications that we are talking about, we need to bear these things in mind, and as I said, I'm going to come back to that again. The one thing that, we've got many things in common with America, unfortunately. But one other thing that we have in common with them is the grotesque price of some drugs, medical drugs that we need in South Africa, that drug companies use and abuse the fact that they've done the research, and you can't get essential drugs for very serious ailments because it's so expensive. Now, the only one decent thing I've heard come out of Trump's mouth so far is the fact that he's been saying that in America he wants to reduce the price of those drugs. He's been very adamant about it, that pharmaceutical companies have been overcharging people and so on, and that he wants to make sure that something is done about that. So I think that when we when we raise the issue of Trump and science, we're actually raising a much wider issue. It's not simply a question of Trump and his attitudes towards science. It's the whole issue of science and society, and what is the role that science plays in benefiting society, and how some people use and abuse science for their own purposes, for making huge profits, and so on. So I think that the question is much wider than the question of Trump and science. UNESCO does have a position on science. And for those of you who don't know, you would, if you are working in the science field, you would profit by going onto their website to look at the work they do on science. Every year or every second year, there's an annual report on science in the world. And it's a really useful document. They also have a very clear position on science, and UNESCO's position on science is summed up, and I want to read this to you. It comes from the 7th World Science Forum on the Enabling Power of Science, which was adopted in Budapest. I think this small quote sums it up. It says, "In keeping with the United Nations objectives, we are determined to fight poverty and hunger and promote just, equitable, and inclusive, peaceful societies and the restoration, protection, and sustainable use of natural resources and ecosystems. We seek an integral approach in addressing the environmental, social, and economic dimensions of sustainable development based on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals." What's very clear to me is that the vast majority of scientists in the world have accepted that we as human beings are impacting on climate change in the world. Everywhere, in every international conference that you go to, thousands and thousands of scientists who work in this area have accepted that we are having a negative impact on climate change and on the world, and that we are in a very, very dangerous situation at the moment. And that if we don't start acting positively, then we're going to be leaving for the people who follow us, our children, and in fact, these days it's so serious that I can talk about my children and my grandchildren. I don't have to talk about future generations. I have to respond to my own son and grandchildren, when I do have them, about what earth we've left to them, and what we've been doing.